A key component of the modern world economy, the chemical industry delivers products and innovations to enhance everyday life. It is also an industry in transformation, where chemical executives and workers are delivering growth and industry-changing advancements while responding to pressures from investors, regulators, and public opinion. Discover how leading companies are approaching these challenges here on The Chemical Show. Join Victoria Meyer, president of Progressio Global and host of The Chemical Show, as she speaks with executives across the industry and learns how they are leading their companies to grow, transform, and push industry boundaries on all frontiers. Here's your host, Victoria Meyer.
Hi, this is Victoria Meyer. Welcome to The Chemical Show. This week, I am speaking with Terry Hill, who is CEO of Barentz North America. Terry joined the Maroon Group as CEO in 2019, and then during the acquisition of the Maroon Group by Barentz, moved to Barentz. He's actually been part of the distribution industry for most of his career, having spent almost 30 years with Univar, and has also been very active in National Association of Chemical Distributors, as well as the Chemical Education Foundation, which is where I first met Terry. So we're going to be talking about a variety of things, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation. Terry, welcome to The Chemical Show.
Victoria, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm happy to have you here. So, Terry, what's your origin story? How did you get into the chemical business and specifically distribution?
Victoria, it's kind of funny how things just work out. And so, the old saying, it's better to be lucky than good. I think, and sometimes I was just lucky. So I grew up in the panhandle of Texas and really didn't know this industry even existed. I mean, I understood, having grown up in the oil and gas industry and the agriculture industry and ranching, and that's sort of what I knew. And I knew I liked the technical aspects. I liked chemistry. But, when I was, growing up, I didn't realize this was here. I mean, I didn't even know this industry was here. So went to school, got a chemistry and microbiology degree, was thinking about medicine, and really had a guy that sort of mentored me in the medical distribution business. So I went to Dallas, worked for him for a couple of years, and then I met still a really good friend of mine. At the time, it was Van Waters and Rogers, which was one of the roots to Univar. He was leaving that company to go work in commercial real estate. He was like, "You've got a chemistry degree and you know distribution. I think this, something you would like." And sure enough, long story short, 30 years with Univar, and was a great combination of your technical acumen and business. And so I love this industry and love what it has done.
So you've certainly seen the industry evolve, right? And it's evolved significantly. So what's striking to you about the chemical industry, the distribution business today versus when you first started out?
It's really interesting because if you think about it, every distributor started the same way. It was a family-owned business, and you can look at Univar Solutions or Brentag or any of them, Barentz, IMCD, every one of them, even the global ones, all the way down to really today, a big part of them are still family-owned. It was a family-owned business, and what they found is an opportunity in their geography, in a specific industry, to bring value to the supply chain. And that's what, to me, is really interesting about our industry, in that, I think about just, bigger picture, the definition of work is to create value. And so for us in the distribution space, it's all about creating value for the chemical manufacturer who chooses to market through distribution, as well as creating value for that customer who chooses a distributor or outsources certain items to that distributor, and it's all about creating value. So to me, I have loved this industry, loved the story about how companies got started, where they just found an opportunity, they found the entrepreneurial spirit, and they created value for a chemical manufacturer, and they created value for a customer and started their businesses. And then obviously over time, what we've seen is a consolidation of the businesses, kind of around the globe. But I think one of the things that's really fun about this business, and while after 35 plus years, I still see it, changing day to day, is there's so many moving parts, and that entrepreneurial spirit to create value is just amazing in our industries, in the distribution space, as well as just the whole industry of chemistry.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's interesting because I do observe the same thing that many of the distributors started out as small family-owned business, opportunistic, saw the opportunity to create value. And then there's been tremendous consolidation, right? So in Barentz, like many others, has been very acquisitive in order to drive growth, in order to create maybe some of those network effects.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, what I find is that, obviously as companies get bigger, typically that entrepreneurial spirit gets squashed underneath processes and standardization, as well as just the fact of merging companies and cultures is notoriously difficult, right? Something like 50% of all acquisitions fail to meet any of those targets. How do you and Barentz ensure success? How do you keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive? And how do you bring companies together and still create and keep the best out of them?
I think one of the comments you made was culture. And, whether in my 35 plus years, I probably have had over, 25, 30 acquisitions. And one of the things that I see, and this is something that we really strive at Barentz, is to look at the culture. Because one of the things that we have found is, one is you target a customer, or as you target a distributor, you look at them and you say, well, first there's a strategic fit or why you're talking to them. So then once you look at that strategic fit, then the real key is looking at the culture. Because one of the things that we found is the success is really around, do you think alike? Do you look at things the same way? Are you entrepreneurial? And some of the things you talked about, as you get bigger, you do have to have processes. But one of the things that we really talk about is turning the org chart upside down. We want to really create the line employee needs to remain entrepreneurial, flexible. We want to provide standard and we want to provide opportunities, but really bringing that culture together is really the key. So, you think about it from a strategic fit, but then the next really kind of milepost is culturally, do we think the way? And sort of our DNA is the same. I've seen instances where that did not happen and we had a lot of work to do. You still had the strategic fit, but there was a lot of transitional things you had to do to bring the cultures in line. And that to me is one of the really key aspects to success, is making sure the culture fit is there.
Yeah, interesting. So let me tackle the strategic fit to the extent that you're able to share that. Barentz has been on an acquisition kick, including during the pandemic, which is when Marin Group joined and continues even today. I know I've seen some recent announcements. What is it? What's the strategy that's being pursued? And what are you guys looking for as you identify those target businesses to bring on board?
Right. Yeah. And I think it starts with the culture. So for us, as we've created a specialty distributor, and one of the things that we really think about is always creating a better solution. So one of the things that we think about is, and I went back to talking about the definition of work is to create value. So one of the things we really think about is our main goal. And when you really think about this, is we want to create value for our employees and their family. So one of the things we always think about is, how do we create more value for our employees and their families around this distribution space, knowing that to create value, the chemical manufacturer has a choice in the distributor he uses or they use, so you have to create value for them. The customer has a choice. So we really think about whoever has a choice, we have to create more value to be a market leader. So whether it's the chemical manufacturer or whether it's the chemical end user or it's our employees, they have a choice of where they work. Why would they choose Barentz? Same thing we think about when we look at targeted acquisitions. We look at them and say, it's not a fit if it's a transition where we look at a lot of synergies. Our whole strategy is buy and build. So every one of our transactions, every one of our over 20 acquisitions globally, the company today has more employees, more value than when we first found them. And so that to me is one of the strategic fits that we look at. So, looking at our history, for example, we knew we wanted to be in the personal care space. So we targeted a regional acquisition for example, in the U.S. Northeast. And then in our hands, we bring them across North America, as well as with Barentz, we utilize the skill on a global basis to bring more producers, more customers, then it allows us to create more value. So that's really our strategy, is how do we create more value for our employees? Because we know if we do that, then their entrepreneurial spirit and their ability, they'll create more value for whether it's the principal or a customer, so that we really think about that.
So you talk a lot about entrepreneurial opportunities for your employees. And I think you said that you want people even at the bottom, when you flip the organization, how do you make sure that they continue to have those opportunities? What does that look like to you? Because I think entrepreneurs, that's a word that gets thrown out around a lot and means different things to different people. What does it mean to you?
One of the things I think is, and I'll just give you an example, like the chemical industry in general, in the past couple of years, I mean, you really think, and we've seen these trends over, different times. In my 37 years, I've never seen it like this, where you had supply chain shortages, you had volatility, you had outages, you had all this kind of convolution of all these different things. I've seen different phases, but not like this all at once. It's been a very unique time. So when you think about those things in our industry, the world is always changing. So one of the things that we think about and how that looks like entrepreneurial, and that's sort of a generic term, but really what we want to do is turn the org chart upside down. And we always think about, that I am the first assistant to the level above, the next level up. And then they're the first assistant to the next level up. We want to keep a flat organization. We want to keep it quick. But really our job is to give strategy. So give here's where we're going, but really empower people and their entrepreneurial ability to say, we've got a supply chain issue. Do we need more inventory? Do we have a shortage on one product? Is there a functional equivalent that we can go do? So really what we have found is the best answers come from the people interacting with the customers or the principals. And our job is really just to support that and help with the strategy and learn. We want to learn. We always want to see what's happening. And so that's what that looks like. So we give a lot of authority, a lot of autonomy to our people within inside sort of a barrier. So it's sort of like a straight map. We want to go from Houston to Chicago. So that's what we want to do. Now, how you get there is really up to you and based on what's happening. So that's kind of the way we think about things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And certainly, as you mentioned, the last couple of years has been full of unexpected events across the industry, right? So product availability and lack thereof, pricing volatility, the supply chain challenges, which has turned, supply chain into a household word. And of course, now inflation, right? We're seeing quite an effect. I mean, we're starting to see quite an effect of inflation. As we record this, I've been looking at the earnings reports from a lot of companies. And so far, much of the chemical industry seems to be holding on pretty well. But, I think none of us know what the second half of 2022 is going to look like. So I think, inflation, potential recession, and just this continuous variability is going to persist. So we'll see where that goes. What's been most significant for you when you guys reflect on the last 2 years? And of course, just frankly, the acquisition of Maroon Group that brought you into Barentz is certainly significant. But what's been most significant for your company over the last 2 years?
Yeah, and I think it's been really a really interesting time. I mean, it's been really exciting to see all the changes because I think one of the things that I see is you've had the pandemic, which changed the way we work. If you think about the due diligence that Barentz did on Maroon, we never were in a room together. It was all done via Teams or Zoom and just meetings. We never were physically in a room together for over a year. So when you think about what technology has done to allow us to continue to work even through a pandemic, I think that's just amazing cultural shift that has occurred. And so I think today you're looking at digital tools, looking at things that are happening. You still have to create value. You still have to create relationships. You still have to do things. But now we have a whole new way of working. I think physically being together is really, really important. But I also think using these digital tools to save time, to save travel, to save, balance of work life, I think it's been a really amazing change that has gone on. And I also think because of all the things that have gone on with just the speed of work, the things that are going on, I think the digital tools has really helped. And to me, so the last couple of years, I really think about we've all had to deal with a pandemic to keep our employees safe. So we're looking at flexible work hours, being able to work from home or work, remotely. We've had some people, obviously there's certain positions you just can't do that. Our laboratory people, our technical people, all that. But we needed to keep them safe. So we needed to segregate that as well. So I think that's one aspect. And then just the changes that have occurred, with the supply chain, all the things, and having to react very quickly has really been amazing in the last couple of years. And I think overall, from a distribution standpoint in general, I think the value of distribution has really elevated itself because of the complexity of the supply chain, because of the complexity of things that happen. I think it's been a really good opportunity for, in general, the distribution market to really show the value and how important of a role we play. What I talk about the business of chemistry, the length and quality of life, because we have been able to fill in for the supply chain and we've solved the problems for people being able to do that so they can get the products on the shelf. So, to me, I think as an industry, we need to stay humble, but I also think we can be a little bit prideful in that our role in the economy, our role in society is very, very important. And I think we've proven that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Terry, because I think often producers, principals would think, there's always this dilemma of, well, do I use, what part of my business do I go through distribution for? What part do I not? And at times, I think there can be a bit of a tug of war, particularly over certain customers and certain scales. I know I certainly saw that during my time at Shell and Clarion and elsewhere. And yet, distributors such as Barentz have just a much wider variety of relationships, right? And so it's the ability to pull on a much broader set of potential suppliers, as well as a much broader set of potential customers that creates those optimization opportunities.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because I think one of the things I always think about is if you can't create value as a distributor to the end customer and to the principal, then that, it's almost like a customer segmentation. If the customer sees no value in what the distributor is providing, then the chemical manufacturer should have that customer, because if distribution can't create value, then long term, that principal won't hold that customer anyway, because they're going to go to the value proposition. But to your point, one of the things that we're starting to see is, both from a technical acumen, from supply chain to sourcing, to be able to put together technical products and specialty applications for them, around the whole encompassing of the formularies, or from the supply chain problems they're having. I was talking to one food company, and one of the interesting things they said is they really like us, as well as other distributors, the technical acumen, because what they're saying to us is, if I talk to one producer, for example, if they're a producer that produces gum, their answer to a thickening problem will be a gum. If I talk to another company that is methacellulose, maybe that's their answer. Because one of the things we love about distribution is you're a little bit chemistry agnostic. You're just giving us the best solution. And it might be a gum, it might be a cellulose, it might be, many other things. So they really like that kind of sparring partner, from a technical aspect. So that's one of the evolutions that I've seen over time with Barentz, as well as other distributors, is that, our saying always creating a better solution is we're really working on the technical level as well as the supply chain, really to create value overall to the customer. And I think in the last couple of years, that's been paramount, because there's been times where they say, I just can't get this product. Do you have a functional equivalent? Or can I reformulate? Or what can you do to help me? And so you're really bringing value, in those kind of conversations.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm glad you addressed that because that was going to be one of my questions is what do you see of value? Because you use that term a lot. When you think about that, that really, especially from a technical formulation perspective, that implies that you guys make quite an investment in that technical formulation work and the lab work to understand really how to apply these different potential products into a solution.
Correct. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we focus on. We target on, what I think when you look at products in the chemical industry, you've got commodities and what I call differentiated products and specialties. And really what we target is differentiated and specialty products. And sort of the definition of a specialty product, the value of the product is in the application in the formulary. So for us, we look at things, we have technical people, and we go to market by verticals. So we have 7 verticals in North America and really kind of globally, whether it's food or animal nutrition or human nutrition or personal care or pharmaceutical or case plastics or HI&I, we really have people dedicated to those industries. So we have personal care people talking to personal care people. We have human nutrition talking to human nutrition, case plastics. And then we back that up with laboratories. And we have PhD chemists and they're coming from the industries and they're looking at, trends and formularies and things that really help us do those things to create solutions. And we partner with our principals. What innovation is out there? What new products are you doing? Where are you bringing value into the formulation? So I think that's really important, in the market.
Yeah. So let's talk about your principles and how do you create value for them? This is maybe a couple question, which is one is, just how do you create value? What's really in it for your principals, your suppliers that you're working with? And then the second piece is how do you strike that balance? Because everybody always wants to be the most important supplier, right? And wants to have first choice. So I guess 1, how do you provide value? And then 2, how do you balance across the needs and desires of these different principles that you work with?
Right. So one of the things that we work on is, and we have what we think is a nice situation where we have principal facing managers as well as customer facing managers. So for us, we really think about, and in the specialty business, we try to be as exclusive as we can in the market so that it allows us to focus on those things. So for us, we look at that and say, we look at the chemistries and we look at the portfolios in our different industries. And we know there's certain industries or certain product portfolios that we need to have to be relevant. Therefore, we know there's certain principles that we need to have to be relevant. So it's sort of a circular conversation. The principals also want a distributor to be relevant in the target markets with the target chemistries that they're trying to apply and sell. And they want people knowledgeable on that. The principals today don't really have time to train distributors or to work with distributors and teach them the industry. What they really want is someone that is industry knowledgeable, understand how their chemistry is used. There may be some, subtle training, but it really is around their individual chemistry. So one of the things that we really try to work on is aligning ourselves with the right principal doing the right chemistry and then really seeing what they want to sell and the best returns for that. So that's the way we think about that. So the synergistic effect of understanding the chemistries that the end customer needs, as well as the principal is trying to sell and to fill that void in the chemistry value, I think is really important when you think about that value. So we really try to think about that where there's people waking up every day thinking about how do I create value for a principal? Because again, going back in the distribution space, principals have a choice in the distributor they choose. So they need to choose the right distributor that can fulfill their plans. So we need to articulate and understand those and then equate that to the customer. Because again, the end customer is the ultimate, person that we need to think about as well.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, how much transparency is there?
Well, that's one of the things we really think is important. I mean, one of the things that we talk about is, kind of the 2 T's, trust and transparency. Every relationship is built with trust. And with our principals, as well as our customers, we try to be very, very transparent. Here's our customers. Here's where we're focused. Here's our value proposition. Here's what we can do because we think that's really, really important. because we really want to align and build a partnership with our principals as well as our customers. So we think that's really ultimately very, very important, just to be transparent with here's the markets, here's where we're, at, because then, it's a pretty straightforward conversation when you're talking about your scorecards or your business plans together. Here's what we're good at. Here's where we're working. Can you help us be better? And it's kind of a circular conversation. Hey, we see, could you tweak this formula? Because we could see where there's an opportunity in the market for, X product that probably is a base chemistry of yours that you could fulfill as well. So I think that transparency is very, very important, especially, in this time with supply chain and all the things that are going on. I think it's really, really important to really have that transparency.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So let's turn back maybe a little bit to digitization. And we talked about digitization in the sense of making it easier to work as a team. Digitization's had a really large focus, certainly since the pandemic, for companies. And it's not just kind of this interpersonal ways of working, but it's also, having a greater web presence, right? Because as individuals, we're all much more if I can order from Amazon and track my delivery on my phone, why can't I do that with a chemical company? And quite frankly, the chemical industry has been pretty slow at making that move, right? And a lot of the reasoning is because of these personal relationships and some of the fine tuning. But what's your take on this? What approaches have you and Barentz been taking as it relates to digitization over the past few years, or what do you see going forward?
Victoria, I think this is, a great question, because I think I've heard this over time. And after I left Univar, I did a lot of work in the digital space and thinking about that, and, even talked to Amazon. And I think one of the things is that the word digital or all these things sort of get kind of convoluted, like what does all that mean? So the way we kind of think about this is, what's our business strategy and how do we create that, going back to create value? And then what are the tools that we have to execute on that? That's when we start thinking about digital. So how do we use all the tools that are available to us to create value in the market? And I think one of the things you talked about is like Amazon. Some of those kinds of things you think about. Our industry is a regulated industry. Not everybody should have visibility and see these things and be able to buy these things. So it's really a controlled network. Amazon is an open network, right? And so what you really need is a closed network. And the other thing is, I think digital tools, it depends on the ERP systems people are using and really what the value that creates, for them. A lot of people, if they have, their ERP and they can enter an order and it electronically goes to their supplier, to go on a separate network is a double work for them. So there's really not an advantage to that other than to self-serve and some of the things you talked about. Hey, safety data sheet or C of A, or let me look at the spec sheet, or I need a formulary. So I think a lot of the distribution space is catering to those kinds of things. And the way we're doing it, we're thinking about this from a digital aspect, is what's our strategy and what are the tools to allow us to succeed in those such strategy. Some of those are digital tools, whether it's Teams meeting or Zoom or some of the things to be able to contact customers or webinars or being able to, reach a lot of people in a low cost manner. That's one way to execute on your strategy using digital tools. Looking at solutions and formularies and things like that. That's another way to execute, using digital tools. We've done a lot of things, YouTube and digital things about, hey, how do you formulate with certain product? Well, here's a quick 1 minute, 2 minute video on how you do that. So I think this is an evolution that is occurring. I think we're starting to see those kinds of things. I think we're starting to see a lot of applications out there that are catering to the market, because I think one of the things is, you could kind of make a circular conversation that the chemical industry has been slow to adopt digital. But I also would tell you there's been a lot of a lack of digital tools specifically for the chemical industry. And I think there's some of those starting to arise now.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you personally, and maybe Barentz has been involved with Blue Palette as one example. So I think it's an evolution, as you say, right? We're going to continue evolving.
The thing I tell people is is think about your strategies and then think about the tools. And is digital a tool that will accelerate, your strategy? Because it starts with, what is your plan? What is your strategy, as opposed to, hey, we just need digital. Well, what's the end game for digital, right? And I think that's something that the distribution and the business of chemistry really needs to think through.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's hard to find that end game. So you find at least your mid game and know where you're going, right? Because the world keeps changing. So Terry, what's next for you in Barentz? What's your outlook for the rest of 2022 for you guys? And as you start looking into 23?
I think we're going to continue to be inquisitive. There's certain markets that we still need to grow more scale and skill and keep developing in. So I think we're going to continue to be inquisitive into the markets. And, as we look forward to the second half of the year, it's kind of the old saying, what goes up, usually comes down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. To us, we're like waiting for this roller coaster ride to go the other direction, and it will at some point. So we're really watching, what the roots of, inflation or deflation, as well as just, demand in the market. The consumer still seems to be weighing in. If you look at North America, the, employment rates still seem to be pretty good, but it's just a matter of time, with inflation and, when is the consumer going to step back a little bit, as well as just globally. Some of the things that are going on between China and the U.S. and Ukraine and Russia, and some of the things that are going on, is going to play themselves out. And I think every one of those situations, again, is an opportunity for the chemical distributor. So I think it's, again, an opportunity for us to create value for principals and customers.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great. Well, Terry, this has been wonderful. I appreciate you taking the time and joining us today. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great. Thank you.
Awesome. And thanks everyone for listening to The Chemical Show. Keep listening, sharing, and following, and we will speak with you next week.
We've come to the end of today's podcast. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and want to learn more. Simply visit thechemicalshow.com for additional information and helpful resources. Join us again next time here on The Chemical Show with Victoria Meyer.